Welcome back to Gators Game Day. I'm Seth Varnadore, joined by Bud Davis once again to talk some Florida football as we kind of roll into this 2024 season. The first episode, which you can go back and watch if you haven't, was kind of about the Frankenstein offense a little bit, how they built it out, why they're so good in the pistol and so bad in the shotgun, and all that kind of stuff. This week, we thought kind of another pressing question from last season, and one we heard questions about throughout last season. We heard them in media days. This has kind of been a big topic since early in the 2023 season. Can Graham Mertz throw the deep ball? What happened to Florida's deep ball offense? In 2022 with Richardson, they were chucking that thing down the field. Last year, I think I've heard Mertz called a check down Charlie, and every pejorative in the book. So, Bud, can he throw the deep ball?
I don't know. I think that's the big thing. Like, you and I were talking, like, when we were kind of planning out like our episodes, we were like, hey, let's do an offense episode and then a defense episode. And we started sketching out the offense episode, and we were like, man, this is like the elephant in the room. What are we going to do? And we had to break out a whole new episode. And I think this episode is going to go pretty long too. Cause this was the story of our offense last year, which was pretty good, but you do any sort of dive into the numbers of the Florida Gator offense in 2023. And we didn't throw deep at all. And it was crazy because, we were texting during 2022, and it was like, all this offense does is throw deep and scramble.
Yeah, there was no, the hope. My hope going into last season was like, okay, they're going to take play action deep shots. That's just part of the offense. Let's see some efficient passing.
Yeah.
Let's see some kind of 15 to the more quick game, more efficient throws. It's not all or nothing. Yeah, let's see some of those. And we saw a lot of those last year. But we did not see kind of as many shots. And it was, during the season, like, okay, yeah, they're not throwing it deep that much. Going back and look at the numbers, it was shockingly low.
It's insane
how few times they threw the ball vertically down the field. And we'll talk about, I think there's some good reasons for that. Like, it makes sense when you kind of go back and look at things. But I don't know if that's.
I think it makes Florida fans so frustrated, like from like the Spurrier days. Like, we're the big, deep passing, explosive offense, and we were like, dinking and dunking literally last year.
That got Ed Zonbrecker fired because he liked to throw bubble screen. I mean, that was like that was kind of his. I mean, I don't remember everything from that era, but I do remember the bubble screens were like the death of him. That bubble screened himself out of town, basically. So,
yeah. I mean, it was wild.
Yeah. So, Bud, I think the biggest question, and this is something that we started to look back, because it's like we said last year, it was Richardson was not great in the quick game. They abandoned that early. It was a lot of deeper shots down the field. That was the thing that the NFL people loved. They always talked, look at his average depth of target. Look how high it is. Like, this guy pushes the ball vertically. These aren't easy gimme throws. And then for it to totally flip, the question is, what is really, like, which was it? Just Richardson was just an anomalous superstar that drug the offense to that, or what is the scheme, or what are the numbers tell you? Which offense is more like what Napier's run in the past?
Yeah, and I think that's what we want to get into on this episode is, like, what can we expect next year? How much of this was Mertz? How much of this was the O-line? How much of this was wide receivers? And how much of this was Napier? And so, like, let's try and break that out. Like, let's look at the film. You and I have done that. Let's look at the numbers. Let's see if we can untangle these and figure out what should we expect in 24. When we threw deep, we actually had like a really good success rate. We were top 25. We were number 23 when we threw deep in success rate. We did good when we threw deep. The problem was we just didn't do it a lot. We were I think bottom 5 in FBS and average depth of target, which is crazy because, the year before we were number 19. So huge change from one year to the other. I've done this analysis before at the NFL level where to have a successful passing offense, what you need is a blend of the two. You need efficiency and explosiveness, in roughly equal proportions. You can't do just one and have a reliable offense. And I think we've seen that the past 2 years. And so what we want in 24 is to see an offense that can be both efficient and explosive. So I think we kind of looked at a few things to get at this. So I think we wanted to start with the numbers, kind of walk through a few things, and then get to the film, and then try and wrap it up with some big takeaways for everybody, right?
Yeah, so let's start. Let's kind of look at it from the offense, the scheme side. Just kind of, was this an outlier for Napier, or is this what Florida fans can come to expect? Like, kind of who's the outlier, Richardson or Mertz? I think is a question a lot of people would like answered.
I think everybody's hoping it's like last year was the outlier, right?
Yeah, I would think.
I'm definitely hoping like we see a little bit more deep passing.
Yeah.
All right. So let's look at some numbers. All right. So in terms of average depth of target, so this is when we threw a pass, how deep did it go? We can look at, unpressured throws versus pressured throws. Generally, pressured throws are going to have higher average depth of target because the QB is holding the ball longer to make these deep targets. The FBS average is the gray box in the middle. And you can see that there's 2 outliers on the shallow side, and they're outliers in terms of shallowness for both the non-pressured and pressured throws, and they're both Graham Mertz. And they're Graham Mertz in 2020 and Graham Mertz in 2023. And I think what jumps out to me for these, Seth, is that these are Graham Mertz's first years running an offense, a new offense.
Yeah.
And we tend to see that as Mertz becomes more comfortable in the offense at Wisconsin, 21 and 2022, we see this average depth of target jump up. And this is great. This makes me feel good for next year. If we can just take a small step forward, this offense gets a lot better.
Yeah.
And I think you look at Napier QBs, they are almost always either average or above average in their average depth of target. Napier prioritizes these deep shots. And I think, you see that when you look at the film, that this scheme asks the QBs to take deep, explosive passing shots. And so what we saw with Richardson looks more like what we saw with Lewis in 20. And it's a little bit of an outlier on the positive side for the not pressured. I think a lot of that is, Richardson was just so good at actually avoiding pressure. But traditionally, Napier QBs have been, average or above average in their average depth of target. So that makes me feel pretty good.
Yeah, and that goes all the way back to his time at Arizona State with Manny Wilkins, too. They were slinging it all over the field. I think his average depth of target was above 12. He threw the ball 20-plus yards, which I know we're looking at 15, but 73 times. So it's Napier's not afraid to sling, and that was a lot more drop back too. So seeing this made me feel a little bit better that this kind of was my thought, that it was more on Mertz than it was on the scheme, but it's kind of good to see it play out in the numbers as well.
Yeah, and so, when I made this chart, my first thought was like, okay, this is clearly a Mertz issue. I think we'll get into a little bit more numbers. Like the first one I want to look at that makes this a little bit more complicated is you start to look at time to throw numbers. And these are really good numbers to look at if you're trying to figure out who's responsible for why you're throwing like under pressure, throwing shallow. And so this is a plot of time to throw on dropbacks, attempts, sacks, and scrambles. And, there's not that much to take away, but that in itself is important. Mertz is pretty much average on his time to throw on dropbacks, attempts, sacks, and scrambles. If we saw Mertz being low on these, we would say, okay, this is clearly an O-line issue. And if it was high, then we'd say this is clearly a Mertz issue or a wide receiver issue. And instead, this data is kind of inconclusive that says, hey, this might be more complicated. There might be some blame to go around. So I think this is an important one, even though there's not some, major blame to distribute here. In fact, it probably says there's a couple things at play.
Yeah, I went and looked because I just wanted to see kind of, okay, I started to try to think who are some offenses that were really vertical, so I went and looked at Washington's offense last year.
Yeah.
I think Michael Penix's time to throw was about the same as Mertz's. It was like a tenth of a second longer or shorter. So yeah, I think there are some other circumstances and other personnel possibly issues that can lead to this a little bit, as well as kind of Mertz as well.
It reminds me of like when you and I went back last year and we tried to chart every sack and who was responsible for it. And, we came to this conclusion that it was pretty much everybody.
Yeah. It was a good mix to go around. And there's a little bit more from that we'll talk about once we talk about some of possibly the other issues that were there. But
yeah. And that kind of goes into this next one is like, when Mertz was pressured, who's to blame? And there's more pressures than sacks. So this is a little bit larger of a data set. And Pro Football Focus has this data. And, this is a chart showing how much of the pressures are, put on the QB. So maybe he's holding the ball too long, or maybe he scrambles into pressure. And how much of the pressures are due to the O-line or the tight end blocking. And Florida plots in the top left, they assign less than 10% of the pressures to Mertz and, just over 80% of the pressures to the O-line and tight end. And that's pretty high for the O-line and tight end. So, I think, for the camp that is, the O-line was bad and that's why we couldn't throw deep. This is probably your best data point that you want to point to, is that it's tough to throw deep if you're getting pressured a lot and the people responsible for the pressure were primarily the blocking. So this is a pretty interesting one to look at.
And this becomes a double-edged sword too, because I went back and looked, like you said, we charted sacks. It was through the Georgia game. So at that point there were 22 sacks, I think, through the Georgia game.
Yeah.
So going back and charting, only 6 of those sacks were with a 5-man protection. So where everybody's out for a route, the quarterback's got to make quick decisions, get the ball to his hands. 10 of the 22 were with a 7-man protection. So you're keeping a tight end in, or you're keeping 2 tight ends in, you're keeping a back in and a tight end in, and you're only getting 3 guys out in the route. So you're not getting the benefit of your protection with 7. So it's max protection, really. You're not getting good protection, and you're having less guys out on the route, which makes it tougher to kind of break defenses down, right? So it's the worst of both worlds, so to speak. And just going back and looking at that, a good majority of the sacks were when we're keeping people in for protection. So that was definitely, I think, a big issue, and it had a cascading effect, I think, with Mertz as well. So
I definitely think like the pressures got to Mertz, which then in turn affected the offense overall. I think we'll kind of get to that after we watch some film, but I do think we have good evidence of that. This next figure is, a pretty interesting one. We looked at Mertz on deep throws. What were his catchable pass rates? So a catchable pass is not a completion, and it doesn't mean he hit the wide receiver in stride, but it's, did he generally get it there on target? And this is a nice way to measure, what is Mertz doing well in our deep passing offense. And so we break this down a couple ways. Pink, like usual, pink, purple is bad, green is good. And so Mertz overall slightly below average on catchable passes. But, you look at him throwing deep out of the pistol, the dude was amazing.
Yeah.
And so I think you're going to show some film of that. But, like, his deep passing out of the pistol was good.
Yeah, and it was – and it ties a little bit into – I'll have a slide right before we get in the film. Napier talked this offseason about what was their evaluation of Mertz before the season. So, and they said he was a fluid mover, and that really fit well with all of the play action and roll stuff, he throws really well in the move, and they always are moving right. So you see a lot of his kind of best throws being on that right side out of the pistol off that play action. We got a good bit of film on that.
Yeah. Not as good from empty, just okay, roughly average. Straight up terrible from empty. He takes that running back, sends him out in a receiver position. Only bad things happen. Down dependence, first, second, or third down. Not much of a trend. Slightly worse on third, slightly better on first. Passing situation, just a little bit worse if we're in a long down and distance. Slightly better if it's kind of an unpredictable passing situation. Slightly better on play action. Slightly worse, with no play action. I think the pressure one here is very interesting. I think it's kind of a wrench in, my bigger narrative of what the data says. Mertz was actually a little bit more accurate when pressured. This could mean that it's a function of time to throw. That's probably my best guess for this. But maybe, he has to invite pressure to wait a little bit more time for wide receivers to come open, to be a little bit more accurate and make a catchable pass. That's my best guess, but kind of an unclear, a little bit of a surprise in the data. Pretty much the same blitz, no blitz. And then this is the big one. This is the one that jumps out of the data is Mertz can't throw left.
He didn't. That's one where I watch. He didn't attempt throwing left a ton.
Yeah.
So there's some where and I've got some examples. So I've got examples of him throwing kind of every direction, what he does well, and I think the misses are kind of consistent.
Okay.
But his really good throws where I think he's best on the move, and those are all to the right side. So like you're taking away when you're going left, you're taking away a lot of his easy ones.
Yeah.
So the throws are a little bit more difficult going back left. He has got a couple misses that there is one particular miss, I think, that's more left, but there's a couple, one of his other big ones is kind of missed on both sides, but,
all right, so why don't you walk us through some of that film? Like now that we've broken out the numbers, we kind of nerded out. We have some things to look for, like maybe it's the O-line pressure, maybe some formation dependence, maybe some direction dependence. Anything else?
Yeah, let's look. So I've got so I took some beautiful pictures at Billy Napier's clinic in Orlando, and this was their Mertz evaluation when he was in the transfer portal. Big, a fluid mover with solid mechanics. He's got the arm talent to make all the throws, durability. Didn't miss any snaps due to injury. That one, unfortunately, missed probably a winnable game there at the end of the year. High ceiling, room for growth within our system, experience of the Big Ten against good competition. The next slide was, I think, even more interesting, and you'll see this. So I don't think this is totally unexpected. Graham Mertz issues, and some of this got better, and some of it, and they showed examples of him getting better at accuracy, timing, anticipation, ball placement, technique, decision making, and footwork. So he was a heavy turnover guy. So I think that is also in the back of his mind. But
Coach, where's the biggest area of opportunity for growth for Graham this year compared to last year?
Well, I think if you look at the season, we go through everything in each offseason. I think we're trying to get him to take advantage and be aggressive of some of the down the field opportunities. And I think if you look at the film closely, there were some opportunities, right? So, again, it goes back to the context, right? Graham's issue was turning the ball over, right? He had issues managing the game, those types of things. We cleaned that up. Now it's time to kind of that tempered aggression, take your chances when you get opportunities. So we've got the weapons to do it, and I think he's in position to have a great year.
Let's watch the film here. I think you'll see some issues with that accuracy, that anticipation and timing and accuracy. I think anticipation is a lot more important down the field, right? And when he wants to throw a lot without air under the ball, it's what I feel like I see. He likes to throw it on a line. Sometimes that comes back to bite him. But these are things that you can improve on, especially more reps with your receivers. So,
All right, passing situation versus Arkansas.
yeah, so we'll go. Let's go. So we'll start his throws to the right. We talked about that's kind of his best, but he wasn't crazy consistent there. Now these throwing it down the field, nobody's going to be unbelievably. What's a good high water mark for kind of consistency throwing the ball at that kind of 20 yards down the field? What is the number you think? Okay, that's in a great range.
I mean, your completion 15 yards down the field, your completion percentage is like 40%, FBS average. Catchable ball rates probably 20% higher, 60%, and then on target 50%.
So this was
1 and 2. 1 and 2.
This was one of his issues, is this kind of ball. The kind of fade, almost like a fade ball, like not even giving the guy a chance. I think that is a miss he had on both sides of the field, right? But then he'd get throws like this down the right side, which is, one of the throws of the year, basically.
Yeah, to Wilson.
Yeah, and to me, when he throws the ball, when he doesn't have to put as much air under it, I think he's more comfortable. Right, here's another throw to the right. Got to put a little bit more air under it, a little short.
Yeah.
Same kind of throws the one to Jackson. Here, working to the right again. This is kind of the same kind of throw to Pearsall. Little late, kind of stutters. Now, you also notice in a lot of these, not a ton of separation.
No, man. These you and I have talked about this. These wide receivers were not it.
This was not. I think, there's some guys out there that, they got to help. They got to help your guy out a little bit, make some plays. So another one again, it's kind of just throwing the go ball. Can my guy make a play? And it's just that's kind of. I think that's his miss. Is he was not great at these. Here's another one that's like this should be a touchdown.
That's a bad miss.
So there's things like that where he misses those. Here's another one on the crosser coming across where, in the pocket, just
that should be, that
now,
should be easy.
In his defense, that had been Pearsall. There was some injury, so now it's a different receiver. It's Jackson running that across instead of Pearsall. Obviously, you've got to throw it for the guy you're throwing to. But, if I'm throwing to a spot, maybe Pearsall gets there. But there are some good throws, too. It's kind of that when you go back and look at it's the consistency part, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this was a great throw over a guy. And this is a throw he doesn't make to his left very well, where I got to throw to a crosser kind of over somebody, over that kind of secondary defender. Another look at that. So he does that one where he's it's a little bit more lateral. It's not just straight down the field. That he's a little bit better on those to the right.
And that's something we see in Napier's scheme. Like that's part of what we see is they get these deep routes that have horizontal movement to it. And, the QBs excel really hitting those in stride. It's the vertical ones that don't have that horizontal component that Mertz seems to struggle with.
Even here, a little bit behind,
Oh, yeah.
And I think some of it is like timing and knowing, okay, when am I going to throw it? Where do I need to back shoulder this? There's a lot of, it's not like easy. But this one right here is like an unbelievable throw that doesn't get called for pass interference. But you watch it from the back end here. I think they catch it. So it's just, I think a lot of it is, this is kind of his miss. But this is like a really well thrown ball if he could get two hands up,
Yeah, it's pass interference.
But this is where he excels. And this is why I think his to the right is so much better, is he throws really well on the move. So kind of flushed a little bit, hits Pearsall down the field.
Pistol rolling right. He's got it, man. Clearly, he dominated that part of the offense. Here we go again.
Yeah. And that's kind of, you go back to that evaluation. He's a fluid mover. Like, he's not the fastest guy. He's not DJ Lagway, obviously, but he can do enough to get out of the pocket, and he throws really well on the run. And you saw that a bunch. Here's a really important play right here. On the run, the same throw he's kind of missed where he's throwing, just dropping back. And on the run, he makes a catchable throw.
Yeah, that was a vertical route too.
Yeah,
Just
so
pure vertical.
he throws a really nice ball when he's moving. Like, here's a great job, and then not an easy throw after getting out of some pressure. So
on a lot of these, he is getting pressured and still making good throws.
Yes, but they're all like, I'm moving to my right. So I like on the move to his right side. He's really accurate. I think it's just lets his athleticism take over. It's a great throw to Andy Jean, who, if a guy like him could step up this year, it'd be really helpful.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at the end. Is who do we need to step up?
Yeah, and then working down the middle. Like, this is the one they showed at the clinic when they're talking about anticipation. And this is the one where Napier said he needed to throw with anticipation because we were playing 2 guards at tackle last year. So, like, he's getting rocked right there, but he throws.
He's got middle of the field open. He trusts Pearsall.
Yeah, throws it. Like, Pearsall's not even got his head around yet. The ball's out. Throws it to a good spot. Let your guy go make a play. And that's something that takes some time, too. And this is another one down the middle, kind of similar. Move the safety, come back. Again, like, he's getting hit on almost all.
Yeah.
He's getting hit on a lot of these.
He moved him with his eyes on that, moved the safety.
Yeah. So now he did have some misses where he could have had some shots down the field. But I thought, overall, that's a tough one. But here's one he throws to Pearsall on a post that's just – they finally protect it. And this one, we'll see from the back end, is like just a perfect throw. It's hard to see. I think we get a good look at it here. So he definitely, it's not a matter of ability. I think he's like, that's really good.
So you think film says he's got the arm for a deep ball?
I think so. If he throws with timing, I don't think he's got a big enough arm to be late. And then these are the ones where it's, okay, there's no separation. Those are the ones you like to, there's somewhere like I'd like for you to just throw it on a rope. Here's where you finally get the way McNeese was playing. They finally get that to take him out of the play, and he throws a perfect ball in stride here. Like, so he's got the ability. Here's the dreaded left, and there were times he threw the ball really well left, but it's just not. It's not really consistent. And he doesn't have that kind of athleticism bailout that I think he does to the right, where it's a little bit more like, this is a great throw.
That's incredible. Andy's getting crushed.
Yes. Notice in a lot of these, he's getting smoked.
Yeah.
This is another great throw that gets dropped. So some of these, like, to the left, the completion percentage is really bad. Well, the play I just showed you before was a drop, count as a drop. This one was a drop. Again, I think he's on the ground back here. Megan, that's a perfect throw. So that's why I'm not as quick to be like, oh, he's terrible to the left, because you'll see, like, here's misses. It's the same misses to the right. This is just a tough throw. Like, it's the same kind of miss, I think, for the most part. This is the miss to the left that I don't think he has to the right, where you want him to throw. And I did see in spring, I feel like I saw him make this throw. So maybe we're improving here. We'd want to be a little bit more air, let him run underneath it. He throws it more on a rope here, and then this guy's able to get back underneath it. You see a similar throw against Vanderbilt, where here's another one. This is not a bad throw. Just, you'll see against Vanderbilt, he has a similar throw. But this is like, if the Arkansas one wasn't the throw of the year, this is up there. Again, like, this is not a super clean pocket. He throws it before Pearsall's turned his head, and it's just giving your guy a chance. Like,
yeah, it's in the basket.
Give him a chance.
Got good air on that one.
Yes, but he's had a couple times where it's like he's trying to throw it too flat. Just let the guy run underneath it. And that was a perfect example. We just do a little bit more of that. Here, good throw to the left. Like, to me, it's not.
Well, did you see the blocking on that last one? They actually picked it up.
Yeah, the play before they ran the exact same play and they did not pick it up. So, and then this one was another really well thrown ball, a great catch, but that's like the spot you want for that ball. So I'm not as I don't think the left is as terrible maybe as the numbers bear out. This same issue right here as the previous one against Arkansas where you're a little too flat where
it needs air.
Give him a little air to it. So
that route could have found a lot more space too.
Yes. And then the old the throwback here on the move. Again, there's not a ton of clean pockets here. But he had some in the Utah game. He threw. This is how you want it. See there's not an underneath defender, so he doesn't have to throw it with as much air. But that's a great spot for that route. And then he throws it to Burke. That was to Burke, and this one is as well, just this fade. So, there were times where he was really good, and I just think he was not really consistent down the field, and some of that is his fault. Some of that. But here's kind of the same miss. Some of that's not his fault. And here's another. I think this is where you got to get to where you're more like, all right, I can trust my guy to go up and make a play. That's not the greatest throw, but it gives you a chance. So this is where I think we see him getting hit in the teeth constantly, right?
Yeah.
This is where you start to get to where the check down Charlie and that kind of thing starts to happen, right? So this is a 3rd and 3, I believe. So, maybe he just wants to try to get the first down here. Florida's got a mesh call, right? They're running mesh in here, but I think we've already got a note with that. Pearsall's going to run a corner. The back's going to run to the flat, right? What you should do, if I'm looking this, is I got eyes on him. If he flies up here to the flat, then I've got the corner.
Yeah.
But now if I feel like I got to get the ball out of my hands fast because I'm going to get my head, mashed, if I don't, I might try to throw the ball very quickly and just pick up the first down, move on with my day. If I can sit back in the pocket a little bit, it's a touchdown, right?
Yeah.
Instead of failed 3rd down conversion. So to me, this is kind of like we see him getting his head beat in a little bit. He starts to get the ball out of his hands fast. And now you miss some opportunities on the field. Napier kind of said as much in the passing game Mertz. Yeah, there are some opportunities down the field. Sometimes the check down is the right thing. So look here. Everyone's dropping back. Well, okay, the check down's the right play. And you can live with that. But there's other times where, you're down 23-0 here. And you've been getting your head beat in. So maybe you're not super excited to see if this kind of wheel route here develops. So you're just going to check it down, and if you can wait a little bit and feel like you have enough time to wait a little bit,
no pressure there.
Yeah, there's a touchdown. Oh no, it was but up to this point, it would have been pretty gnarly for him. So, but yeah. There's that right there. So there are times where he's missed some, and I think some of it is the offensive line, right? There's some of it's his decision making. Then there was a couple in there, like a couple of the checkdowns that are on him, but a lot of it's like the offensive line. Do you trust them to give you the chance to make these plays? I mean, look right here. He makes the throw. Luckily, he throws this one in anticipation because your left guard just gets whipped.
Your left guard gets killed,
and he's able to. He's get enough time to get the ball down the field, and your receiver goes up and makes a play on it. But it's not exactly a clean pocket. And so what happens when that happens consistently is I start to pull my eyes down early. So I'm looking at the safety here. Safety moves. Perfect. If I got a seam ball here, I move the safety. I can come back to that. So he looks to come back to it, right?
Yeah. He's got him.
This guy is already starting to get in his face. You can see he's already starting to lose ground backwards to try to get a lane. And he can't quite get it. And you have a touchdown there if you can protect it better. Not even great, just a little bit better. And that's kind of a consistent theme to me is not only does the offensive line play hurt when you actually call these plays, because here's another one. We've seen him hit this where Pearsall's coming across. He hits him on The run, I mean, they're playing like man free. He's up the sideline, beats one guy. It's a big play. Instead, you're getting sacked.
Yeah, and that was one where he kept the running back in to protect and didn't work out for anything.
Yeah, Georgia. Like, you have two guys come open here if you can protect it. He's coming open. They're bracketing this, so you could throw it to him as well. Instead, as I go to step up, I get the ball knocked out of my hand. Instead of getting a first down at worst, now it's a fumble. They get the ball, going and score. So, and here's the one, like the one we saw earlier, where you're like, oh, the protection was great. Here was like the literal play before, I think.
Oh my God.
This guy is screaming open, but you don't have any time to get him the ball. So, that to me is the biggest issue. Mertz was able to avoid pressure, but it's not as much as like Richardson was able to the year before.
Yeah.
And so I think that his inability to escape pressure as much. Here's you can get a corner out one-on-one, your best receiver on a safety. His inability to escape pressure plus how bad the offensive line was kind of leads you. So here's one you bring a corner, but if you can protect it, look what you got here. It's just it changes the way you call offense too. And you'll see, like, I mean, look here, this is an easy touchdown if you just, your left guard doesn't get whipped. Instead,
so much of these pressures from the interior is crazy.
Instead, I'm getting crushed, and now I'm at the ball sails on me. So, like, these are the ones, like, this is a left miss. I mean, it may not qualify. I just put it in here. This might be too short to qualify, but the same idea. Like, I'm throwing left, but I got absolutely hammered. So, and here's another one. I think this may be the last one where, I'm keeping a lot of guys in here to protect. I got 3 guys out in the route. The back check release is out. Just get crushed here. You're going to get the safety starting to play with this, and then you got Pearsall would come open over here if you have the time to throw it. But you're just getting hammered. So that's like a combination, I think, of a little combination. Here's probably the last one where this is a touchdown you need to get back in the game here. You've got it. You run the smash. He's going to break to the corner, break back to the post. You've got it, but you get hit right as you're throwing here. And the ball sails just a little bit, and you don't complete it. So there's some on him. I think there's definitely – he plays a part for sure. But the protection issues, I think, were the biggest factor in why they didn't throw the ball down the field more.
Yeah, and I mean, this is why we bring the film to it. Is, these charting numbers are great. People sit down, watch every play, write down what happens, try and make it make sense. We try and make it make sense with the data. And then you watch the film and it's like, man, how much of that can you put on Mertz?
Yeah, I think there's some, but there's definitely, like, even on the throws he makes, there's like the pocket is dirty a lot. So I think he, there's times where I watch it. I'm like, man, this is like, this is an easy throw. This is a throw he should be able to make, and maybe next year he will.
And you're a former QB. I mean, I feel you're a good judge of what Mertz should be able to do, what he should not be able to do, what's asking too much, what's and that O-line pass rush just
it's like he is like a tough dude. Going back and watching, like, man, he took hits on. And some of those games, even like you look at the pressure rates, they're in like the 40% for the game. It's like he's taking hits on almost every time he drops back to pass, it feels like. And if not, they're going, they're throwing the ball crazy short to avoid it.
Yeah.
And then you get it's a check down artist, and now my average depth of target is excessively low. Like we were talking beforehand, the Kentucky game, we saw him check that one down. He got sacked 3 times in the Kentucky game, but the pressure rate was 40.5, which was, funnily enough, the same as South Carolina, right? Pretty much the same, but 40.5%. The next week against Vanderbilt, they start by throwing like a bubble screen. The average depth of target against Vanderbilt was 1.8 yards.
Yeah.
Like, I think they figured out after the Kentucky game, because that was the first game, if you go back, the whole O-line's healthy. Kingsley's back. Everyone's healthy. We're good to
We're going to
go.
be great.
Oh, wait, we're just not very good up front. So we need to change.
That was the eye-opener for everybody last year.
So we need to, okay, they're just not that great. So we got to change what we do. Which then you go see the Vanderbilt game, a lot of quick throws. Every time you tried to throw it downfield against Vanderbilt, they brought pressure. You got hit. So I think they adjusted the offense and the play calling as much as they could to protect Mertz as much as they could going forward, because he was just getting his head beat in. Now, some games, South Carolina.
While still having an effective offense. Our offense was above average last year, and our passing offense was the only reason for that.
Yeah, so I think there is some reason for optimism there, because I think Mertz, like you showed, he's not great in year ones. And then you watch the film, it's like, okay, he's a little inconsistent. Some of it may be timing, getting on the same page with the receivers. Well, you feel pretty good there. And if they can get a little bit better up front, I think that'll help a ton.
Yeah. All right, I got three more charts.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's run through them, see if we can come away with some big takeaways. I think you kind of nailed it with the film, but let's see if we see anything else in the data that's worth taking away from this. And I'm pretty excited about these because, when we talked about how we wanted to set this up as, is this a Mertz issue, a scheme issue, or something else, we definitely knew we had enough data from Mertz's career and Napier's career to compare. And I ended up on these charts. So first, we're going to look at Mertz. And there's 5 things we're going to look at, and that's deep passing percent. So that's the rate at which they threw 15 or more yards downfield, completion percent, catchable percent, their in-stride target percent, and then the rate that they were pressured on deep throws. I think with Mertz, what jumps out is we kind of already talked about this, is this rate at which he throws deep passes has been low in his first years, but then gone up, where in his last year, he was well above FBS average. So I do think he has the potential to take these shots. Some of it might just be getting comfortable in the system. Completion percentages average to above average. That means Mertz is making good decision. He's, not just going to throw the ball around. He's going to wait till he has a good open receiver to make that throw. I think some of that might be compensating for a slightly below average arm. His catchable ball rate on deep passes is below average on every year of his career. His on-target pass rate, what jumps out to me is it's inversely correlated with the pressure. The more he gets pressured, the less likely it is he's able to throw an on-target pass. So that's hitting the receiver in stride. And I think we saw that. And then we didn't have the receiving core to take catchable passes and turn them into, explosive plays last year with, yards after catch.
Yeah, there's a lot of 15-yard throws for 15-yard gains.
But, his in-stride passing rates, one standard deviation below average, but his pressure, the rate at which he was pressured on his deep passes is one standard deviation above. So you can get any of those, regression toward the mean next year, plus a second year in the system. And I think we can be pretty positive about deep passing next year.
And you're hoping improvement at the positions around him too, right? The offensive line, you're hoping that transfer portal haul you brought in with those real tackles, you say, really helps shore everything up.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. Yeah, we'll find out pretty quick against
Miami.
I
think that'll be a great test early. You'll know early if they're better.
All right, next one. Let's go over same stats, but looking at Napier QBs. You see a lot of stuff just looks pretty normal for Napier. Deep passing rate, there's a wide range on catchable, wide range on in-stride, but generally they tend to be pretty normal or above average, with Mertz being kind of an outlier on the in-stride rate and the deep passing rate and the pressure rate. To me, it looks like Napier's scheme is pretty good at hitting the deep passes when he's got the QBs to do it, pretty good at getting low pressure on the QB, getting high completion percentages. Mertz is kind of the exception. A lot of this, to me, makes me feel pretty comfortable with Napier's ability to take deep shots and generate explosive passes.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think his reliance on kind of the run game and the play action shots, like you should, if you call it well enough, you should be getting, big windows to throw into. And if you're throwing with, like Florida did at times last year with 7-man protection off of a run fake, well, then you should have nice protection too. You should have a nice protected, easy throw. It just didn't matter how many guys they had back there. They couldn't protect it last year.
Yeah. All right. So kind of the last thing is we wanted to look at, why don't we wrap up kind of our overall thoughts on, what we think about what was ultimately responsible for the deep passing problems. I think for me, I put the low average depth of target. I don't think it was really that much of a scheme issue. I think you can kind of look at Napier's data going back, and it seems like he's got the deep passing, and Mertz is really the outlier of Napier's coaching career. For Mertz, this is kind of comparable to his first year at Wisconsin, but there's nothing to suggest that he can't throw the deep ball like he did in his last year there. I think the O-line, probably was the major issue. And then I think the wide receiver core was really limited. I don't think we had many deep threats last year.
No, I think it was not, I think you could say, yeah, part of it was scheme, but it's because they adjusted to personnel. I do think you could say that part of it was scheme last year, but that's because of other factors. Like, yeah, we're not going to take as many shots downfield if we can't protect it. Or we're going to make sure we have a bunch of outlets or a bunch of quick throws because we're not great in pass protection.
Yeah,
so that'll
we don't
bring
have guys that can make separation.
Yeah, we don't have the guys that can separate quick enough, right? Like I brought up Washington earlier with Michael Penix. They had those 3 unbelievable receivers. So, yeah, I can get the ball in my hands really fast because my guys are winning really fast too.
Yeah.
Pearsall, obviously a really good player, but, teams could bracket him. And I think you also saw kind of when your next best player is a true freshman, they're limited a little bit, especially if they don't come in January. They're limited by what they know and how much they can execute. So I think there was kind of a variety of factors that it's somewhat more of an outlier type season for a Billy Napier offense for sure. And you're hoping that it stays that way as you go into next year, because if you can get, like we talked Frankenstein offense in terms of shotgun and pistol, but we've seen a Frankenstein in terms of 1 year, great deep passing, very inefficient. The next year, a lot of really good from 15 and under, but no deep passing. If you could mix those, like you said earlier, now you're really got a really good passing game going. So, hopefully that's what you get with Mertz being in year 2. It'll be interesting to see how the receiver room shakes out. Can Wilson be a deep target, or is he going to be kind of that? Is he just going to take up for Pearsall and kind of be kind of a Swiss Army knife everywhere? I think that's probably where he's headed. But DK was a legit track guy. In high school, he can run. And then you got guys but he's not he's not an outside receiver, I don't think. So who's going to be that guy to take the top off outside to get Wilson in those 15, 20-yard pockets underneath? That's the question.
Yeah, and I've got a figure. So this is receivers' average depth of target and then their average yards after completion, yards after catch.
Yeah.
So orange are, UF who played in 2023. Blue are past UF players. And then red, DK and Badger, those are our transfers. So how do they fit in? How do the guys we're bringing back fit in? You want a distribution of skills across your wide receiver room. These Wilson numbers are really low because of all those pop passes, those Utah passes. Yeah. He's probably more like a Tony role. We're going to see that bump up this year, hopefully to see a lot of whip routes. Badger, pretty low average depth of target. He's more kind of the Swain type. Ceiling might be Grimes, where he's, shallow intermediate, but, he's a great yard after catch guy.
Yeah, he'll fit a nice role. There's, you go back and watch some games where, they've run in some package play RPO stuff where the X has just a hitch if the corner's off. and that was Khalil Jackson last year. If you're playing off Badger, the way Badger is run after catch, like those could turn into big explosive plays.
That's
now,
a huge
your average depth of target is not going up, but you get your explosive pass plays that way for him. But yeah, you still don't have that guy like they did that first year that could really take the top off.
Yeah. And I think, DK, his numbers, he's looking, he's kind of on this distribution of Pearsall, what we saw in 22 versus 23. He's in between that. He's close to kind of like Grimes when Grimes was at his deepest, but really he's similar to Copeland in terms of where he's at. And then with Douglas's transfer, we really don't have a deep threat on the roster. We don't have a shorter Henderson type who's really going to take the top off of defense. Maybe Burke will step up or Mizell. I'm pretty skeptical about Burke, pretty skeptical about Jackson. So I'm hoping for Mizell, but also this offense generates a lot of explosive passes on horizontal routes, not the vertical ones. So I'm kind of hopeful for how they're going to use Badger and DK.
My one thing on Burke, I think it's a really good idea of kind of where he is from a maturity standpoint. So every year they have the clinic, they have the coaches clinic. You get to come watch spring practice. So I went. Napier's first season went to spring practice, watching, and they're doing like a normal receivers drill. Nothing crazy. You're supposed to go around a cone, hit the cone, turn, catch the ball, tuck it away. Like it's like a warm-up drill. Burke comes around the cone, doesn't put his hands up, takes the ball right off the face mask. And all the receivers are laughing and joking. I'm like, are you serious, dude? So I think he may have had some maturity issues early. But the way, Napier's talked about him, and he's talked about how proud he is of how much he's grown up and so he's a guy that he flashed as a freshman. I think he had like a huge game against South Carolina in the game that ended up getting Dan Mullen fired, but he had a really big game. So he's made some plays down the field. It's just been that consistency. I only tell that story because it seems like he's come a long way. I don't want to tell it to bury him. It seems like he's improved, but
I'm skeptical. A receiver in his fourth year, he doesn't have 20 career receptions. He's
the next. What is it? Was it Rick Wells? Was that the?
Yeah, his yards per route run is under 1.5. Those are metrics that don't say that you can rely on this person for SEC play. And
I only tell that story because that would be okay, maybe he's matured a little bit and he's taken it a little bit more seriously, and maybe he was just kind of running routes out there before, and that's how you get it of 1 yards per route run. You're just out there running routes.
Man, we'll see.
Maybe, but I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket. And then I think the one thing you have to feel happy about, or at least kind of gives you some hope, is you look at the receiving classes Napier's brought in, and he puts a big premium on speed.
Yeah.
So if one of these young guys, which is you don't want to rely on, but Wilson popped last year. If one of these younger guys pops, one of your freshmen or redshirt freshmen, that might be where you get that little infusion of speed, and maybe it's just a package here or there, but they can take the top off. That really helps.
And I don't think we need a big, fast X, only chuck it up deep guy, like Shorter was. I don't think we have to have that in this offense. And I think having 3 wide receiver weapons plus maybe getting a Gene Mizell or one of these freshmen to pop, 3, 4 guys, I think Napier and co are going to be able to do stuff with that. I think my bigger concern is actually the O-line.
Yeah, after going back and seeing even on good throws you make down the field, you're still getting hammered. That's got to get cleaned up, and I think they put resources into cleaning it up. So hopefully those pay off. It's really a lot of did you hit in the transfer portal?
Yeah.
If you did, man, the offense could be really good. If you missed in a couple spots, could be tough.
For me, this is like a big year because, I've been preaching for years now that you got to get offensive tackles out of high school. You can't get them in the portal. And this year, Florida went out and we got the guys, some of the guys who are the offensive tackles in the portal. And if it doesn't work out, I think, I'm going to be pretty skeptical that you can ever make it work out.
Yeah, those guys, the really good ones, don't seem to go in and be able to play right away really well. So, but if they do, I think you're in really good shape. So, final verdict. I don't think it's Mertz's fault. Totally. I think he might be able to throw down the field.
I don't think it's the scheme. I think it's a little bit of, Mertz getting pressured so much that he took more checkdowns than he should. But the pressures in the O-line are probably main fault. Wide receivers didn't help.
Yeah. And it was like a factor of looking at just the total, just the gross number of throws. Like it was like 30 or 40 less than the normal Napier quarterback on shots down the field. So I think some of it is Mertz being cautious with the football. Some of it is he doesn't have a lot of time to throw, so he just wants to get the ball out of his hands. And then some of it was he was not as consistent down the field as I think he could be. And that was my big concern with him when he came in is he's got the talent. He can make all the throws, in which they said on that kind of their evaluation, he can make all the throws, but can he make them down the field consistently? And I think with another year, they have a really good system in place to coach quarterbacks. So I feel like you're going to see improvement. And if he can take that next step, then now he's got a chance to kind of keep playing football for a while. So that would be great to see.
You asked a good question, like when we started looking at the charts and you were like, hey, or started looking at the film, you were like, what's a good number? And it was all, basically a middle number and a really good number and a bad number are all within 10% of each other. We're talking about getting better on 1 out of 10 throws. And I think we can do that. I think that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah. So, and hopefully they get so good that he throws lefts more than 10 times even. That'd be unbelievable.
And completes more than 3 of them.
Because right now was a Zoolander.
Yeah. It's not an Ambi Turner.
So hopefully they can get it fixed. Thank you for watching episode 2 of Gators Game Day. I think
we're on Spotify now.
Yes, you can find us on Spotify, maybe on Apple if you get your podcast there. That would probably be sans video though, but Spotify has the video as well. So find us on YouTube,
pretty cool.
On Spotify, and maybe other places you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening. We'll be back in the coming weeks with a look at the defense, which should not be with as much positives, I don't think, as the last couple episodes. But
like and subscribe so you don't miss it.
Yes, like and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Gators Game Day. Bud is at JBudDavis. I am at Seth Varnadore on there. Anytime we post something or put something up for the show, it will go there. But subscribe on Spotify and YouTube so you don't have to look out for our messages. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.